Hello, my dear listener. Peace be upon you wherever you are in the world tonight. Welcome to this peaceful and gentle space where you can rest, feel calm, and let your thoughts float softly like clouds in a quiet sky. Tonight we will listen to the true story of Esther and King Xerxes, told in a very slow and peaceful way. This story comes from the Bible and is full of beauty, strength, courage, and love. It will unfold gently, just like a candle flickering in the darkness. The words will help you settle, feel safe, and slowly drift into a night of deep and restful sleep. Before we begin, I would love to know where you are listening from. Are you in a quiet little town? Are you somewhere where the stars are shining? Or perhaps in a city where the lights sparkle outside your window? Maybe you are wrapped in a blanket with your eyes already beginning to close. Wherever you are welcome here. If you find this story soothing and peaceful, please like this video. You are also invited to subscribe to this channel so you can return whenever you need peace and calm. And if you know someone who would enjoy a bedtime story like this, you can gently share it with them too. Now it is time to rest. Let your hands relax. Let your shoulders soften. Let your breath come slow and gentle. This is your time for stillness. Let us begin our journey. Long ago, in the days when kings ruled over vast empires, there was a land filled with sunlight, spices, gardens, and golden palaces. This was the kingdom of Persia. And in the heart of Persia, in a city called Susa, there lived a powerful king named Xerxes. He was a mighty ruler. His kingdom stretched from the far corners of India to the wide lands of Africa. 127 provinces made up his empire. He had generals and noblemen, wise counselors and princes who served him. King Xerxes lived in a grand palace in Susa. The palace was built with columns of marble, doors of cedar, and decorations made of silver and gold. Gardens surrounded the palace, blooming with lilies, roses, and date palms. Birds sang from the trees and water flowed gently through stone channels. In the 3rd year of his reign, King Xerxes decided to hold a great feast. He invited nobles, officials, and governors from across his empire. They came with rich gifts, fine robes, and camels bearing spices. For 180 days the king showed them the greatness of his kingdom. Jewels glimmered. Golden goblets were lifted in toast. Laughter rang out through the marble halls. When the great feast ended, the king decided to hold another banquet. This one was for everyone who lived in Susa, from the highest noble to the simplest worker. No one was left out. It lasted 7 days and was held in the garden of the king's palace. There were white and blue linen curtains tied with cords of fine purple. Silver rings held them in place. Couches of gold and silver stood on a floor made of alabaster and marble. Drinks were served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other. The wine flowed freely, just as the king wished. But he gave an order that each guest could choose to drink or not, and no one would be forced. It was a time of great beauty and delight. At the same time, Queen Vashti held a banquet for the women in the royal palace. She was the king's wife, and she was known for her beauty and noble presence. Her banquet was quiet and elegant, filled with music and soft laughter. On the seventh day of the king's feast, he was feeling merry and pleased. Surrounded by his nobles, he remembered Queen Vashti. He wanted to show her beauty to all the people. So he called for her. He sent 7 of his servants to bring her wearing her royal crown. But Queen Vashti refused. She chose not to come before the king and his guests. She did not wish to be displayed before them. Her answer was clear and firm. When the king heard this, he became angry. In those days, a queen refusing the king was a great offense. It caused confusion and concern among his counselors. The wise men of the kingdom came to the king and said, "If this is known throughout the empire, women everywhere might begin to act without respect for their husbands. There may be discord and loss of honor." They advised him to remove Queen Vashti from her royal position. She would no longer be queen, and someone better, someone more worthy, would take her place. The king listened to their advice. He sent a royal decree to all 127 provinces. It was written in every language so that all people could understand. The decree said that every man should be ruler over his own household. It also said that Queen Vashti would no longer appear before King Xerxes. And so the queen was removed. The palace became quiet. The sound of music faded. The silks no longer rustled behind her steps. The rooms where she once walked were now still. Time passed. The king's heart softened. He remembered Queen Vashti. He remembered her grace. But the law had been written, and it could not be changed. His servants saw that he was restless, so they offered a new idea. They said, "Let beautiful young women be brought to the palace. Let them be given beauty treatments and special care. Then let the king choose from among them a new queen, one who will delight his heart." The idea pleased the king, and so it was done. Messengers were sent out across the empire. Young women from many lands were brought to the palace in Susa. Each one was to be cared for by the king's servants. They would be treated with oils and perfumes. Their hair would be washed and braided. Their hands would be softened with myrrh and frankincense. And in time, one of them would be chosen to wear the crown. But among them, there was one whose story would be remembered forever. Her name was Esther. In the quiet city of Susa, where the walls of the palace gleamed in the morning sun and birds nested among tall trees, life moved gently onward. Outside the palace gates, people went about their day, sweeping courtyards, carrying baskets of figs, weaving linen, and greeting neighbors in the warm light of dawn. And among the people was a young woman named Esther. Esther lived with her cousin Mordecai, a kind and thoughtful man who worked near the palace gates. He was part of the Jewish people who had been taken from Jerusalem during the exile. Though far from their homeland, Mordecai and Esther kept the teachings of their ancestors in their hearts. They remembered the ways of prayer, the value of wisdom, and the quiet strength of faith. Esther was gentle. She did not speak loudly or draw attention to herself. Her beauty was not just in her face or her hands, but in her kindness, her humility, and her peaceful spirit. She cared for others, listened closely when spoken to, and offered comfort in soft, quiet ways. Though her parents had died when she was young, she had grown up under Mordecai's protection. He had loved her as his own daughter, and she loved and honored him deeply in return. One day, news arrived in the city. Servants of the king walked through the streets, reading aloud from scrolls and speaking to the people. The king had sent out a command. He wished to find a new queen. Young women from across the empire were to be brought to the palace, where they would be cared for and prepared. And from among them, the king would choose one to wear the crown of Persia. When the decree reached Mordecai's part of the city, he looked at Esther. She was quiet, as always, her hands folded in her lap. Mordecai knew she was wise and gracious, and perhaps it was meant for her to go. So Esther, along with many other young women, was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to the care of Haggai, the official in charge of the women. The house of the women was separate from the rest of the palace. It was calm and still, with soft rugs, gentle fountains, and rows of perfumed oils and ointments. Here the young women were given beauty treatments for a full year. 6 months were spent with oil of myrrh, which softened the skin and soothed the body. Then 6 more months with spices and perfumes, which brought a sweet fragrance and left a gentle glow on the skin. But Esther did not ask for special jewels or grand clothing. She accepted only what Haggai, the king's servant, gave her. Haggai was wise and had seen many women come through the palace. But there was something special about Esther. She did not act with pride or greed. She listened carefully and walked with humility. Her presence brought peace. Because of her gentle heart, Haggai gave her the best place to stay. He gave her 7 maids to serve her. He offered her the finest clothing and cared for her in every way. And soon all who saw her noticed the beauty of her spirit. Not just her outward appearance, but her calm nature and graceful ways. Each day Mordecai walked near the palace courtyard. Though he could not see her or speak to her directly, he stayed close. He asked the servants how she was. He listened carefully for news. He prayed for her with quiet hope in his heart. The months passed. In time, each young woman was brought to the king. They entered his presence in the evening and returned in the morning to a different part of the palace. Unless the king was pleased with them and called them by name, they would not see him again. At last, it was Esther's turn. She rose in the morning and prepared herself, not with worry or pride, but with peace. She wore what Haggai gave her. She did not ask for gold or silks or anything more. Her heart was still and calm, like a pond untouched by wind. When she entered the king's presence, something beautiful happened. King Xerxes looked at her and was moved. Among all the women who had come before him, she stood out. Not because of boldness or glittering jewels, but because of something deeper, something that could not be put into words. It was her quiet strength, her honesty, her grace. It was the way she did not try to impress, but simply was herself. The king was pleased. He smiled. He spoke kindly to her, and he placed a royal crown upon her head. Esther became Queen of Persia. A new feast was held in her honor. It was called the Feast of Esther. The palace was once again filled with music, candles, and laughter. Servants prepared platters of fruit and bread. The king declared a holiday across the provinces. Gifts were sent. Joy spread throughout the kingdom. But Esther told no one that she was Jewish. Just as Mordecai had instructed her, she kept that part of her life quiet. She did not yet know why it mattered, but she trusted the wisdom of her cousin. And Mordecai remained near the palace gates. Each day he returned to his place, listening, waiting, and watching. He felt joy for Esther's new place in the kingdom, but he also felt something else, a quiet sense that this story was not finished. Soon the peace of the palace would be shaken, a threat would arise, and Esther, the gentle young woman with quiet strength, would be called to a purpose greater than she had ever known. But for now, the palace rested. Esther walked the quiet halls in silk slippers. The curtains swayed in the breeze. The lamps burned low in the evening, and the stars shone high above the city of Susa. Esther, the hidden star, now sat upon the throne. In the days that followed Esther's crowning, the palace in Susa settled into a new rhythm. The great banquet had ended, the gifts had been sent, and the kingdom once again moved under the quiet rule of King Xerxes and his new queen. The seasons shifted softly. Flowers opened and closed. The fountains bubbled gently in the courtyards, and the walls of the palace glowed warm gold in the afternoon sunday. Esther continued to live with grace and dignity. Though she now wore a royal crown and moved among nobles and royalty, she remained humble in spirit. She spoke kindly to the servants, listened carefully to those around her, and never forgot the gentle teachings she had received as a child under Mordecai's care. She had not told anyone that she was part of the Jewish people. Not even the king knew of her heritage. As always, she followed Mordecai's advice with deep respect. Her obedience was not from fear, but from love. She trusted him, as she had since she was a little girl. Outside the palace, near the entrance to the royal gate, Mordecai continued to keep watch. Each day, he walked along the path near the stone walls. He could not speak with Esther directly, but he stayed nearby. He spoke to those who passed by and listened quietly to the flow of palace news. His heart remained tied to Esther's well-being, and he watched for anything that might bring her harm. One afternoon, as the warm sun hung low over the towers of the palace, Mordecai stood in his usual place near the king's gate. The marble underfoot was warm, and the breeze rustled the palm leaves above. He heard voices, not loud ones, but quiet, hurried whispers. Two of the king's guards were speaking. Their names were Bigthana and Teresh. They stood under a fig tree near the entrance, their backs half turned to the palace wall. Mordecai noticed the way they leaned in close to one another. Something about their tone made him uneasy. He moved closer, slowly, not to draw attention, and he listened. The guards were angry. They spoke with sharpness in their voices. Their words were full of bitterness toward King Xerxes. Mordecai listened in stillness as the two men plotted against the king. They were palace guards, trusted to protect him, but now they planned to do him harm. They were speaking of treachery, of a secret plan, of striking when the king least expected. Mordecai's heart grew heavy. He knew what he had to do. As soon as the opportunity came, he sent word to Esther. quietly through one of her trusted servants, he told her what he had heard. And Esther, who still listened to Mordecai as she had always done, went immediately to the king. She spoke his name gently. Her voice was calm, but her words were firm. She told the king that her cousin Mordecai had uncovered a plot. Two of his guards, who served closely at the palace gates, were planning to harm him. The king listened. He called for an investigation. Servants were sent, guards were questioned, and after careful searching, the truth was confirmed. The plot was real. Bigthana and Teresh were arrested and brought to justice. The danger to the king was removed. The entire event was written down in the royal records. The scribe took out a scroll and carefully recorded what had happened. He wrote about the plot, the investigation, and the name of the man who had uncovered it, Mordecai. It was written and placed in the book of the Chronicles, which held the memories of the king's reign. But though the matter was recorded, no reward was given at that time. Mordecai returned to the gate. He said nothing of what he had done. He did not ask for praise. He did not expect reward. He was simply glad that the king had been kept safe. That was enough for him, and so the days passed. The sky turned from blue to rose each evening. Lanterns were lit along the palace walkways, and the city of Susa slept in peace. But something was beginning to stir. In the shadows of the court, a man named Haman was rising in power. He was not noble in heart, though he wore fine robes and bowed before the king. He was ambitious. He craved honor and praise. And the king, for reasons of his own, raised Haman to a high position. He gave him more power than any other noble in the land. The king ordered that all officials should bow before Haman and honor him. And many did, but Mordecai did not. Each time Haman passed through the gates or entered the court, the others bowed low. Mordecai stood tall. He did not raise his voice. He did not act with anger, but he would not bow. The servants of the gate asked him, day after day, "Why do you not bow to Haman?" Still, he would not. In time, Haman noticed. He asked who this man was who dared to defy him, and the servants told him. They said, "That is Mordecai. He is a Jew." From that moment on, Haman's heart burned with anger. But he did not want to punish only Mordecai. He began to think of something greater, something darker. He began to form a plan to destroy not only Mordecai, but all of his people, all the Jews in the kingdom. And yet, inside the palace, Esther still walked the quiet halls. She did not know what was coming. She had not yet heard of Haman's hatred, but soon the time would come when her voice would be needed. Soon, the one who had been hidden would be called to speak. Soon, the queen would face a choice. But for now, the fountains continued to flow. The stars continued to shine. And in the quiet of the evening, Mordecai stood once more by the gate, watching and waiting. For the story was not over, and the hand of heaven had not yet revealed all it planned to do. The days in Susa were bright and golden. Children played in the dusty alleys. Merchants carried baskets of spices and cloth. Gardeners trimmed fragrant hedges beside the palace walls. Everything seemed peaceful, but within the grand stone corridors of the royal palace, a shadow had begun to grow. The man named Haman, now second only to King Xerxes in power, had begun to carry himself with great pride. He wore rich robes, embroidered in crimson and gold. His sandals were made of fine leather, and his voice echoed through the halls when he gave orders to the servants. Everywhere he went, men bowed before him. They lowered their heads and pressed their hands together as a sign of honor. Every official, every noble, every visitor in the court obeyed the king's command to show respect to Haman. But Mordecai did not bow. He stood tall at the king's gate. He watched Haman pass with steady eyes. His heart remained calm, but he did not lower his body in submission. He had chosen to bow only before the one true God. Haman noticed. At first he passed by in silence, then with a frown. Soon his glances turned sharp and filled with growing hatred. He asked the others near the gate, "Who is this man who refuses to bow?" They told him again, "That is Mordecai. He is a Jew." Haman's anger flared, but he did not act immediately. He controlled his words. He smiled in front of the king. He hid his plans beneath soft tones and folded hands. But in his heart, he began to turn his hatred not only toward Mordecai, but toward all of Mordecai's people. Haman did not want to punish just one man. That was not enough. He began to imagine a far greater punishment, one that would reach across the empire. He wished to remove all the Jews from the land. And so, in the stillness of his private rooms, Haman began to plan. He waited for the right time. He studied the calendar. He cast lots which were called pur. The lots were meant to tell him the most favorable day to act. They were stones or sticks, used by the people of the time to make decisions. Haman believed they would lead him to the best moment to strike. The lots were cast in the presence of Haman, day after day, until they landed on a month called Adar, the 12th month of the year. And with that date in mind, Haman prepared to speak to the king. One morning, dressed in his finest robes, he entered the presence of King Xerxes. The king sat on his throne, a golden crown upon his head. His face was calm, his eyes watchful. Haman bowed low and began to speak. "There is a certain people scattered throughout the provinces of your kingdom," Haman said. "They are different from the others. Their customs are not like ours. They do not follow the king's laws. It is not in your best interest to tolerate them." The king listened quietly. "If it pleases the king," Haman continued, "let a decree be written to destroy them. I will pay a great sum into the royal treasury to make this happen. Let those in charge carry it out in all the provinces." King Xerxes looked upon Haman. He trusted him. Haman had served him well in the past. He did not ask which people Haman spoke of. He did not ask their names or their customs. He simply removed his signet ring, the ring of authority, and gave it to Haman. "Do as you please," he said. "The people and the money are yours." Haman bowed again and left the throne room with quiet satisfaction. He now held the king's ring, and with it the power to issue royal decrees. Scribes were summoned. The orders were written in every language spoken across the empire, from India to Africa, from the great cities to the smallest villages. Each decree carried the king's seal and could not be changed. The orders were clear. On the 13th day of the 12th month, all the Jewish people were to be destroyed. Young and old, men and women, all were to be killed. Their property would be taken. Their names would be erased. The scrolls were sealed. Messengers on horseback rode out swiftly. They carried the letters across the desert paths, through the mountain roads, and into every corner of the empire. As the messengers galloped away, the city of Susa slowly began to understand what had happened. The people were confused. They read the scrolls with disbelief. Many were silent. Others whispered to their neighbors with furrowed brows and fearful eyes. The city fell into deep sorrow, and in the heart of the city, at the king's gate, Mordecai read the decree. He tore his clothes. He dressed in sackcloth, a rough fabric worn in times of mourning. He poured ashes on his head. He walked through the city, crying with a loud and bitter voice. He did not enter the palace, for no one dressed in sackcloth was allowed to pass through the gates. But he stood near, and the news of his mourning spread. Other Jews in every province heard what had been ordered, and they too wept. They fasted, wept aloud, and dressed in sackcloth and ashes. Some lay on the ground, unable to eat or sleep. Their hearts were broken. In the palace, Esther heard of Mordecai's grief. She was told by her maids and her eunuchs. She was deeply distressed. She sent him clean clothes, hoping he would remove his sackcloth and be comforted. But he would not accept them. So Esther sent Hathach, one of the king's servants, to go to Mordecai and find out what was wrong. Hathach went to the city gate. He found Mordecai in his torn clothes, covered in ashes. Mordecai spoke quietly to him. He explained the whole matter. He told him of Haman's evil plan and the decree that had been sent out. He even gave Hathach a copy of the written order, so that Esther might see it with her own eyes. He told Hathach to tell Esther that now was the time to act. She must go before the king. She must plead for her people. She must speak out. Hathach returned and gave Esther the message. But Esther was afraid. She sent a message back to Mordecai. "Tell him," she said, "that no one may approach the king in the inner court unless they are called. If anyone enters without being summoned, they can be put to death. Only if the king holds out his golden scepter can that person live. And I have not been called to the king for 30 days. When Mordecai heard this, he sent back a message that would reach into the deepest part of Esther's heart. "Do not think that you will escape in the palace," he said. "If you remain silent at this time, help will come from somewhere else, but you and your family will be lost. Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" And with those quiet words, the choice stood before Esther. The palace was quiet that night. The lanterns along the stone walkways burned low. The scent of myrrh drifted through the halls. Servants moved softly, their sandals whispering against the marble floor. And Queen Esther sat alone in her chamber, the letter from Mordecai resting in her lap. She read it again. Slowly, carefully. The words had settled deeply into her heart. "Who knows," Mordecai had written, "but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" She closed her eyes. Esther had always trusted Mordecai. From her childhood, through the years he raised her, through her quiet rise to the palace, she had always listened to his voice. But this was different. She was being asked to go before the king. And in Persia, no one, not even the queen, could simply enter the king's inner court, not without being summoned. To do so was dangerous. If the king was displeased, the punishment was death. Only if he lifted his golden scepter would a person be spared. And it had been 30 days since Esther had last been called to see him. Still Saturday. Her fingers touched the soft folds of her robe. She looked toward the window where the moonlight painted silver lines on the floor. She thought of her people, the ones who had wept in sackcloth, the ones who had fasted, the ones who would be destroyed if no one stood up to Haman's plan. She thought of Mordecai, standing outside the palace gates, his clothes torn, his heart broken, and she knew it was time. Esther sent a final message back to Mordecai. "Go, gather all the Jews in Susa," she said. "Tell them to fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days and 3 nights. I and my maids will do the same. After that, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." Mordecai received her message. He bowed his head, his heart full of both fear and hope. He gathered the people. They fasted. They prayed. Their voices were quiet, their eyes filled with tears. For 3 days, the city of Susa felt different, quieter, slower, as if even the wind was waiting. And inside the palace, Esther too prepared herself. She and her maids did not eat or drink. She did not sleep much. Her thoughts turned often to the words of the scroll, the decree, the death sentence. But still she remained calm. She walked the quiet corridors. She breathed in the stillness of the palace gardens. She remembered the stories of her people, the ones of Abraham, of Moses, of Ruth. Stories of faith, stories of courage. She held them close like a warm cloak in the darkness. On the 3rd day, she rose early. She bathed in warm water scented with rose petals. Her maids dressed her in royal robes. They placed a simple crown upon her head and brushed her dark hair smooth. She said very little. Her heart was steady. When she was ready, she stepped into the hallway. The great doors that led to the king's inner court stood before her. Beyond those doors was the king. Beyond those doors was a choice that could cost her everything. But she walked forward. The guards stood aside. The doors opened. Inside, the king sat on his throne, facing the entrance. Around him stood nobles and officials. Servants watched in silence. Music played quietly from somewhere far off. The moment Esther entered, every eye turned toward her. She walked with gentle steps, not hurried, not slow. Her robe flowed behind her like a river of silk. Her hands were folded before her. Her eyes met no one's but the king's. King Xerxes looked up. He saw her, and his heart softened. She had not been called. Her appearance was a risk. But she stood before him with such grace, such stillness, such quiet bravery, that something stirred within him. He rose from his throne, and with his right hand he reached out the golden scepter. The moment passed like a breath held in the wind. Esther stepped forward and touched the tip of the scepter. The king spoke. His voice was calm. "What is it, Queen Esther?" he asked. "What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given to you." But Esther did not rush. She did not ask for judgment. She did not name her enemy. Instead, she spoke gently. "If it pleases the king," she said, "let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." The king raised an eyebrow. "A banquet?" "Yes," she said softly. He nodded. "Bring Haman at once," the king commanded, "so we may do as Esther asks." And so the three of them, the king, Queen Esther, and Haman, sat together later that day in the palace at a private banquet. The table was set with golden plates. Fruit, bread, and wine were brought. The air smelled of figs and cinnamon. The room glowed with candlelight. As they ate, the king turned again to Esther. "Now tell me," he said, "what is your request? It will be given to you. And what is your desire? Even up to half the kingdom, it shall be yours." Esther smiled gently. "If I have found favor with the king," she said, "and if it pleases you, then let the king and Haman come to another banquet tomorrow. I will prepare it. And then I will answer the king's question." The king agreed. So did Haman. He was pleased with himself. He believed he was being honored more than any other man. He left the palace that evening filled with pride. But even in his joy, Haman saw Mordecai at the gate, still standing, still not bowing, and all of Haman's happiness fell away. His anger returned like a fire inside his chest. When he reached home, he told his wife and his friends of all the honors he had received, of his invitation to dine with the queen. But then he added, "Yet none of this means anything to me as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the gate." His wife and friends gave him cruel advice. "Have a tall pole set up," they said, "and in the morning speak to the king. Ask that Mordecai be put to death on it. Then go joyfully with the king to the banquet." The idea pleased Haman. He ordered the pole to be built that very night. But even as hammers rang out and wood was shaped, another hand unseen by men was guiding the night. For the time had come, and the one who had chosen Esther had also chosen this moment. The moon was high over the palace of Susa. Its silver light slipped through the windows, casting soft shapes on the stone floors. The wind moved slowly through the date palms in the garden. The city was quiet. Candles burned low in their holders. Even the fountains whispered more softly than usual. It was a peaceful night. But King Xerxes could not sleep. He turned in his bed. He adjusted the pillows. He closed his eyes again and again, but rest would not come. His thoughts moved without direction, like leaves floating in a slow-moving river. He thought of the queen. He thought of the court. He thought of all the things a king must think about. But most of all, he felt unsettled. Though there was no sound, no cry, no storm outside his window, something deep within him refused to rest. Finally he sat up. He called for a servant and gave a simple request. "Bring me the book of the Chronicles," he said, "the record of the affairs of the kingdom." The servant nodded and quietly left. Before long, he returned carrying a scroll. It was long and heavy, rolled tight and tied with ribbon. This book held the memories of the court names, events, decisions, and judgments, all recorded by scribes in the presence of the king. The servant sat near the lamp and unrolled the scroll. In a soft voice, he began to read aloud. Names passed through the room like ghosts. Governors, generals, counselors, and messages sent to faraway lands. And then something changed. The servant's voice grew steady as he read the next part. In the days when Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officials who guarded the doorway, became angry and plotted to harm King Xerxes, their plan was discovered by Mordecai, who sat at the king's gate. Mordecai reported the plot to Queen Esther, and the matter was fully investigated and found to be true. The two officials were punished, and the king was saved. King Xerxes leaned forward. He listened closely to the words. Then he asked, "What honor or recognition has been given to Mordecai for this?" The servant paused. He looked down the scroll, scanning the lines. "Nothing has been done for him," he said quietly. The king was silent. He sat with the thought. This man Mordecai had once uncovered a deadly plot. He had saved the king's life. And yet, nothing had been done. No reward, no ceremony, no thanks. His name had been written down and then forgotten. But not by the king. Not anymore. Just then, as the first light of morning crept over the palace roofs, the king heard a sound in the outer court. "Who is in the court?" he asked. The servant peered out the doorway and answered, "Haman is here, waiting to speak with the king." It was early. Haman had come to the palace as soon as the sun had risen. He had one purpose in mind. He wished to ask the king for permission to execute Mordecai. The tall pole had already been built in his courtyard. It stood sharp against the sky. He was eager to see his plan fulfilled. "Let him come in," the king said. Haman entered the room and bowed low. But before he could speak, the king asked him a question. What should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Haman's heart swelled with pride. He thought to himself, "Who would the king want to honor more than me?" So he answered with great excitement, "For the man the king delights to honor," Haman said. "Let a royal robe be brought, one the king himself has worn. Let a horse be brought, one the king has ridden, with a royal crest placed upon its head. Then let one of the king's highest nobles lead the man through the city streets, proclaiming before him, 'This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.'" The king nodded slowly. "Go at once," he said. "Get the robe and the horse. Do exactly as you have suggested. But do it for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not leave out a single thing you have mentioned." Haman froze. His heart sank. His thoughts spun like wind on dry leaves. But he could not argue. The king had spoken. And so Haman, the man who had come to ask for Mordecai's death, was now the one commanded to honor him publicly. He left the room, his face pale, his spirit broken. He found Mordecai at the gate, still sitting in his usual place, quiet, watching. Haman placed the royal robe on his shoulders. He helped him onto the king's horse, and with great difficulty he led him through the streets of Susa. People turned to look. Haman walked ahead of the horse, his voice steady but hollow as he repeated the words, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." And Mordecai said nothing. He did not gloat. He did not mock. He simply sat tall upon the horse, his face calm, his hands resting gently in his lap. When the procession ended, Mordecai returned to the king's gate. He took off the robe. He sat down again in his place, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Haman, on the other hand, rushed home. His head was covered. His heart was heavy. He told his wife and his friends what had happened. He told them how he had been forced to honor the man he most hated. And they said to him, "If Mordecai is of Jewish origin, and you have begun to fall before him, you will not overcome him. You will surely fall." While they were still speaking, messengers arrived from the palace. It was time for the second banquet. Queen Esther was waiting, and though the morning sun had risen and the city was awake, something far greater had begun to stir. The balance of power was shifting. Justice was coming, and the quiet courage of one woman would soon be revealed to the world. The palace was quiet again. Soft light filtered through the high windows of Queen Esther's private hall. Cushions were arranged neatly on the floor. Incense rose slowly from golden holders. The scent of frankincense and saffron lingered in the still air. Esther stood near the table, arranging the final touches for the meal she had prepared. The bread was fresh. The fruits were carefully chosen. The wine rested in a tall glass vessel. Everything was ready. She took a breath and folded her hands. Her heart was steady. For 3 days she had fasted. For 3 nights she had prayed. And now the moment had come. This was not a moment of shouting or loud demands. This would be a moment of peace and grace, spoken with calm strength and gentle courage. This was her time to speak for her people. Soon, footsteps echoed softly down the corridor. The king had arrived. He entered with his usual calm. His robe flowed behind him like a wave upon smooth stone. And beside him walked Haman, dressed in his finest clothes, though his face still carried the shadow of his humiliation from that morning. The pain of leading Mordecai through the city had not yet faded. But now he smiled again. He had been invited once more to dine with the queen. He believed he was still favored. He believed he still held a place of power in the queen's heart. They entered the room and bowed. Esther welcomed them quietly, her face full of peace. The king's Saturday, Haman followed. The servants poured wine. Dishes were placed on the table. The food was delicious, but the true purpose of the meal was yet to come. After some time, the king looked at Esther with warm eyes. "What is your petition, Queen Esther?" he asked gently. "It will be given to you. And what is your request?" "Even up to half the kingdom it shall be granted." The room fell quiet. Esther stood slowly. Her robe shimmered in the light. Her voice, though soft, was full of meaning. "If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life, this is my petition, and spare my people, this is my request." The king's face changed, his brow furrowed. He leaned forward. "Your life? Your people?" Esther continued. "For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and wiped out. If we had only been sold as slaves, I would have remained silent, because no trouble would be worth disturbing the king. But this is our very lives." The king's face grew dark. "Who is he?" he asked. "Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing?" Esther turned her head slowly toward Haman. "The enemy and the oppressor," she said with calm clarity, "is this wicked Haman." Haman froze. His body stiffened. His breath caught. His heart dropped like a stone in deep water. He looked to the king, then to Esther. His mind raced, but no words came. King Xerxes rose from his seat. His face was filled with anger and disbelief. He walked out into the palace garden, needing air, needing space to think. Inside, Haman remained. He fell to his knees before Esther. He had no more pride, no more plans, no more power. He saw only one chance, and it was fading quickly. He pleaded for his life, begging the queen, trembling with fear. Esther remained calm. She had no need to raise her voice. Her courage had already been shown. The truth had been spoken. What needed to happen was now in the hands of justice. Moments later the king returned, and when he saw Haman falling before Esther, touching her couch, his anger deepened. "Will he even harm the queen while she is with me in the house?" the king shouted. As soon as those words left his mouth, the guards stepped forward. They covered Haman's face with a cloth. One of the king's servants, Harbona, stepped forward. He said, "A tall pole stands in Haman's courtyard. He set it up for Mordecai, the man who saved the king's life." The king turned to him. "Hang Haman on it," he said. And so the man who had planned to destroy Mordecai was judged by the very tool he had built. His pride had brought him low. His cruelty had led to his fall. The king's anger began to settle. The halls of the palace fell quiet once more. Queen Esther stood still. She did not rejoice in Haman's end. She did not speak of victory or revenge. She thought of her people, scattered across the provinces, still under threat, still waiting. She turned again to the king. She fell at his feet, weeping softly. Her tears fell without shame. They were tears of love, of sorrow, of longing. "If it pleases the king," she said gently, "and if I have found favor in your eyes, and if you think it is right, let an order be written to cancel the dispatches that Haman wrote to destroy the Jews in all the provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" The king looked at Esther. Then he looked at Mordecai, who had now come to stand before him. The king said, "I have given Haman's estate to Esther, and he has been punished. Now you, Mordecai, may write another decree in the king's name on behalf of the Jews. Write as you see fit. Seal it with the king's ring. For no decree written in the name of the king and sealed with his ring can be undone. And so, in the days that followed, a new message was prepared. The days following Esther's brave petition were filled with quiet preparation in the palace of Susa. The golden light of dawn streamed softly through the windows, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of blossoming gardens. King Xerxes had listened carefully to Queen Esther's words, and his heart had been moved. The dark plan of Haman was no more, and now a new path was about to be set in motion. The king understood the great power he held in his hands, the power to give life and to bring hope. The royal scribes were summoned. They gathered in a cool chamber, their scrolls unrolled before them. Their pens, made from sharpened reeds dipped in ink, moved slowly and carefully, writing words that would travel far beyond the palace walls. Mordecai, now honored by the king, stood nearby. His robes were clean and bright. His face was calm and steady, filled with quiet joy. He watched as the scribes began to write the new decree. The words were clear and strong. They told of the king's decision to allow the Jewish people to defend themselves. They declared that anyone who tried to harm them would be punished. They gave permission for the Jews to gather and protect their homes and families. The scrolls were sealed with the king's ring, the same signet ring that Haman had once carried. Now it marked a message of protection and hope. Messengers were prepared once more. This time, they rode with a different purpose. Their horses galloped through the cities and towns, carrying the new decree in every language and script. From the bustling streets of Babylon to the quiet villages by the rivers, the people heard the news. Where once there had been fear, now there was a new courage. Where once there had been sorrow, hope began to bloom. Jews gathered together in every province. They fasted no longer in despair, but in thankfulness. They prayed with lifted hearts. They wore fine clothes and shared meals with their families. The city of Susa, once heavy with worry, now shone with celebration. Mordecai sent messages throughout the land, encouraging his people to be strong and faithful. He reminded them of the mercy they had received and the kindness of the king. His words were soft but powerful, like the gentle rain that refreshes the earth. And Esther? She continued to walk the halls of the palace with quiet dignity. She never forgot the moment she had chosen courage over fear. She prayed daily for her people and for the kingdom. Her heart was full of gratitude, but also of humility. She knew that her place was not to boast, but to serve. Days turned into weeks. The festival of Purim was established to remember these events. The casting of lots, the turning of the tide, the salvation of a people once threatened with destruction. It was a time of feasting and joy, of giving gifts to one another and to the poor. In the gentle rhythm of life, the memory of those days was kept alive with songs and stories told by the firesides. Parents whispered the story of Esther's bravery to their children. Teachers shared the lessons of faith and hope with their students. And through it all, the hand of the one true God was present, guiding, protecting, and loving. The kingdom of Persia continued on, grand and vast, but forever marked by this quiet, profound story of courage and grace. Mordecai remained a trusted leader. The king honored him greatly. He wore the royal signet ring, the same one once held by Haman, as a symbol of his place in the court and his service to the people. Esther and Mordecai worked together to bring peace and justice to the land. They were a shining example of faith in action, of standing firm in difficult times, and of trusting in a higher plan. And so, as the stars danced above the city of Susa, the people slept peacefully, wrapped in the comfort of a story that had changed their lives forever. The story of Esther, the hidden queen who found her voice at the right time. The story of a king who listened. The story of a people who were saved. And the story of hope that still lives in quiet hearts today. In the days that followed the king's new decree, the people of Persia felt a new light in their hearts. What had once been a time of fear and sadness transformed slowly into a season of hope and joy. The threat that had loomed over the Jewish people was lifted, and a new story began to be told, one of courage, faith, and celebration. Mordecai and Queen Esther, standing side by side, knew that this moment was special. It was a turning point not just for their people, but for the entire kingdom. They understood that the memory of this salvation must be kept alive through the years, carried in the hearts and minds of every generation. And so, Esther and Mordecai established a new festival a day to remember the great deliverance, to rejoice in survival, and to give thanks to the one who watches over all. This festival was called Purim. The name came from the word pur, which means lot, a reminder of the lots cast by Haman to choose the day he planned to destroy the Jews. But Purim was no longer a day of fear or doom. It was a day of joy, of laughter, and of sharing. The preparations for Purim began quietly at first. Families cleaned their homes. They cooked special meals. They made sweet pastries called hamantashen, shaped like triangles, which were said to symbolize the hat of the wicked Haman, now defeated. These treats were shared with friends and neighbors, a gentle reminder that good had overcome evil. In every town and city, people came together. The synagogue bells rang softly, calling all to gather for prayer and reading. The book of Esther, the story of the hidden queen and her courage, was read aloud. Children listened with wide eyes, their faces glowing in the candlelight. Elders nodded, remembering the days of old. The reading was not hurried. Every word was spoken with care, as if each phrase were a precious treasure. The listeners learned how Esther had risked everything, how Mordecai had stayed faithful, how the king had listened and acted justly. Then came the moment to give gifts. It was a time of kindness. Gifts were given not only to family and friends, but also to the poor and needy. Baskets of food, coins, and warm clothes were shared. No one was forgotten. People wore bright clothing on Purim. Some dressed in colorful robes. Others put on masks or costumes, playfully recalling the hidden identity of Queen Esther herself. The streets filled with music and dancing. Children played games. Neighbors embraced one another warmly. The festival lasted for days in some places. Feasts were held, with tables full of bread, meat, fruits, and wine. Laughter echoed through the streets like gentle waves. The joy was quiet but deep, like the steady glow of a fire on a cool evening. At the heart of Purim was a simple but powerful message. No matter how dark the night may seem, the morning will come. Courage and faith can change the course of history, and kindness is stronger than cruelty. The story of Esther and Mordecai was told again and again, not only to remember what had happened, but to inspire hope for the future. It reminded the people that even when they felt small and hidden, their voices mattered, that they could stand strong with faith, and that help often comes from places unseen. Kings and rulers changed through the years. Empires rose and fell, but the festival of Purim endured. It became a day of light in the long calendar of the Jewish people. It was a promise whispered from one generation to the next, a promise that good will triumph in the end. In the palace of Susa, Esther and Mordecai continued their work for peace and justice. They never forgot the lessons of that time. They ruled with kindness and fairness. They cared for the poor and the vulnerable. Their names were remembered with respect. And in quiet moments, when the sun dipped low and the stars came out to shine, Esther would look up at the sky and smile softly. She knew that her journey had been part of a greater story, a story of love, of hope, and of quiet bravery. The festival of Purim was her gift to her people, a reminder that courage in the face of fear can bring light even to the darkest places. And so, as the world turned and the years passed gently on, the people slept peacefully, wrapped in the comfort of a story that teaches us all to stand, to hope, and to love. The story of Esther is more than a tale from long ago. It is a story that has traveled across the centuries, carried in the hearts of many who find comfort and courage in her example. In the quiet moments, when the world grows still and the mind seeks peace, her story reminds us of the power of quiet strength and the grace of faith. After the festival of Purim was established, life in the kingdom of Persia began to settle into a new rhythm. The great city of Susa, with its tall columns and sprawling gardens, was alive with the sounds of peace. Children laughed freely in the streets. Merchants sold their goods without fear. The palace itself shone with a calm dignity, a place where justice was honored and mercy was shown. Mordecai remained a trusted advisor to King Xerxes. His wisdom was sought in many matters of the kingdom. He was known not for loud speeches or grand displays, but for his steady presence and kind heart. He remembered the danger his people had faced and worked tirelessly to protect them. Queen Esther continued her quiet work as well. She was a symbol of hope for many. Her courage to speak up for her people, even at great risk, became an inspiration for those who heard her story. She never sought power for herself. Instead, she used her position to bring kindness and understanding to a world that often seemed harsh. The days passed slowly, filled with small moments of grace. The morning light would fill the palace chambers with warmth. Birds sang softly outside the windows. Servants moved quietly through the halls, their footsteps barely audible on the marble floors. The gardens bloomed with flowers that filled the air with gentle fragrance. In those peaceful moments, Esther would often sit by the window and look out over the city. She thought of the many lives touched by the events she had lived through. She remembered the fear, the sorrow, and the hope that had carried her through. She also thought of the future. She knew that the story of Purim was not just for one people or one place. It was a story for all who struggle against fear and uncertainty. It was a reminder that courage can be found even in the quietest hearts, that faith can move mountains, and that hope can shine like a light in the darkest night. The people of Persia came to love the festival of Purim as a time of joy and reflection. It was a time to remember that even when the world seems uncertain, there is always room for kindness and courage. It was a time to celebrate life and the power of standing together. Families gathered to share meals. Children dressed in bright colors and sang songs of joy. Gifts were exchanged with smiles and warm embraces. The poor were cared for with generous hearts. The community was united in a gentle spirit of giving and remembrance. Through all of this, the story of Esther lived on. It was told in soft voices by the firesides. It was taught in schools and homes. It was written in books and passed down like a precious treasure. And in the hearts of those who listened, it planted seeds of courage and hope. The story teaches us that even in the face of great danger, standing up for what is right can change the world. That kindness and faith are stronger than hate and fear. That each person has a place in the unfolding story of life. As you listen to this story now, in the quiet of your own space, you can feel the gentle power of Esther's legacy. It is a story that invites you to find your own courage, to speak your own truth, to trust that even small actions can make a difference. And now, as you prepare to rest, you can carry the peaceful message of Esther in your heart. Let it soothe your mind. Let it calm your thoughts. Let it remind you that you are part of a greater story, one filled with love, hope, and light. Sleep well, knowing that courage is within you, that peace can be found in stillness, and that, like Esther, you can shine softly but powerfully in the world. Good night, dear listener. May your dreams be gentle, your rest deep, and your heart full of quiet strength. The days after the festival of Purim were filled with quiet reflection throughout the kingdom of Persia. The story of Esther and her courage had spread far and wide, bringing hope to many hearts. Yet, even as joy settled over the land, the work of peace and justice remained a steady and humble task. Mordecai, now a trusted advisor to King Xerxes, understood this well. Though his name was honored and his role important, he did not seek glory or praise. Instead, he focused on guiding the people with wisdom and kindness, helping to build a community rooted in faith and trust. Each morning, as the sun rose slowly over the city of Susa, Mordecai would rise as well. He dressed in simple robes, not the finery of a royal courtier, but clothes that reflected his humble spirit. His face was calm and thoughtful. He spent his days listening to the needs of the people, speaking gently with those who sought counsel, and working alongside Esther to bring peace to their world. The king valued Mordecai's advice deeply. He knew that true leadership came not from power alone, but from listening and understanding. And so, Many matters of the kingdom were brought before Mordecai, who weighed them carefully and answered with wisdom. Mordecai often met with the elders and leaders of the Jewish communities scattered throughout the vast empire. He encouraged them to teach their people about faith, kindness, and courage. He reminded them that the strength of a people comes not from weapons or wealth, but from unity and trust in the one who watches over all. In the quiet courtyards of Susa, families gathered to hear Mordecai's gentle words. Children sat close, eyes wide with wonder, as he shared stories of their ancestors, stories of Abraham's faith, Moses' leadership, and Ruth's loyalty. These stories were not just memories. They were lessons that helped shape the hearts of young and old alike. The people learned to face challenges with calm determination. They practiced forgiveness and kindness. They reached out to neighbors in need and cared for the poor and the lonely. And through it all, the festival of Purim remained a joyful reminder of the courage that could change history. Esther, too, was present in these gatherings. Her own quiet strength inspired many. She spoke softly about the power of prayer and the importance of speaking up for justice. She encouraged her people to be brave, not with swords or weapons, but with faith and love. Together, Esther and Mordecai became symbols of hope and peace. They showed that even in a world often filled with uncertainty and fear, it was possible to live with calm courage and gentle hearts. As the seasons changed, the city of Susa blossomed. Gardens grew lush with flowers. Markets thrived with fresh food and handmade goods. People smiled more freely, their hearts lighter. At night, when the stars shone brightly in the sky, the city would grow quiet. Families would gather around lamps and firesides. They would tell the story of Esther again, reminding each other that courage comes in many forms, that every person, no matter how small or hidden, can make a difference. And as you listen to this story now, you too can feel the quiet strength of Mordecai and the gentle spirit of Esther. You can imagine the soft sounds of the city settling down for rest, the cool night breeze brushing softly against leaves, the peaceful hearts of those who have found hope. Let this peacefulness fill your mind. Let it calm your thoughts and ease your worries. Like the gentle night, may you rest deeply and awaken refreshed. Remember, courage is not always loud or grand. Sometimes it is the quiet voice inside, telling you to keep going, to be kind, and to trust. The life of Esther and Mordecai after the events of Purim was not one of sudden change or grand celebrations every day. Rather, it was a journey of steady faith, quiet influence, and deep care for the people of Persia. Days flowed gently like a calm river. The palace in Susa was filled with a warm light that seemed to come from within, a light of peace that grew stronger each day. Esther continued to use her position not for glory, but for service. She visited those who were lonely and brought comfort to those who were troubled. Her presence was a gentle balm to the weary. People came to know her kindness and wisdom, and her heart was filled with the quiet joy of helping others. Mordecai, too, remained devoted to his role as advisor and leader. He worked tirelessly to maintain harmony among the many peoples of the kingdom. His voice was soft but firm, his actions steady and just. Together, they taught the value of patience. They showed that true strength is often found in waiting calmly, trusting that things will unfold as they should. They reminded others that even small deeds of kindness can grow into great changes over time. In the markets of Susa, children learned about Esther and Mordecai not as distant figures, but as examples to follow. Their stories were shared at home and in schools. They learned how courage need not be loud or bold, but can be quiet and steady. They saw that even those who seemed hidden could make a difference when they spoke with truth and acted with love. The festival of Purim became more than just a day of celebration. It became a season of reflection and growth. Each year, the people renewed their commitment to kindness and faith. They gave gifts not only to friends, but also to strangers and those in need. They shared meals with joy and gratitude. At the heart of it all was a deep trust in the unseen. Esther and Mordecai both believed that a higher power was guiding their lives and the lives of their people. This faith gave them courage to face challenges and hope for the future. One afternoon, as the warm sun bathed the palace gardens in golden light, Esther and Mordecai sat together beneath the shade of a large fig tree. The air was filled with the soft sounds of birdsong and the gentle rustling of leaves. Esther looked at Mordecai and spoke softly. "Do you think our people will always remember?" she asked. Mordecai smiled gently. "I believe they will," he said. Because the story is more than just words. It is the courage we carry in our hearts, the faith that gives us strength. It lives in every act of kindness, every prayer whispered in the dark. Esther nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "And as long as they hold on to that, the light will never go out." Their conversation drifted quietly into the afternoon. They spoke of dreams and hopes, of the future and the past. They spoke of the small steps that lead to great journeys. In the days that followed, Esther continued her work quietly but faithfully. She met with women and children. She comforted the sick. She listened to the stories of those who felt forgotten. Her heart grew fuller with each gentle act. Mordecai, meanwhile, continued to advise the king wisely. He helped settle disputes with fairness. He encouraged leaders to care for their people. His presence was a steady calm in the ever-changing world. The story of Esther and Mordecai, gentle and true, continued to inspire the people. It reminded them that courage is found not only in great deeds, but in quiet faith. That even when the world seems uncertain, kindness and hope remain. And so, the life of the kingdom moved on, peaceful, steady, filled with small moments of grace. The story of Esther and Mordecai is a reminder of the power found in quiet faith and gentle courage. Their journey shows us that even when the world feels uncertain and challenges seem great, a calm heart and a steady spirit can make a difference. After the events of Purim and the new peace established across the land, Esther and Mordecai's lives were not filled with grand celebrations every day. Instead, their days were marked by steady care, patient kindness, and thoughtful guidance. The kingdom of Persia was vast and diverse. Many people lived within its borders, each with their own stories, joys, and struggles. Esther and Mordecai knew that peace was not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice and love. And so they worked quietly, often behind the scenes, to bring these gifts to the people. Esther's role as queen was gentle but powerful. She listened closely to those around her. She welcomed their stories with an open heart. She comforted those who were sad and encouraged those who were afraid. Her quiet presence was a source of strength for many. Mordecai, respected and honored by the king, remained humble. His wisdom was sought by leaders throughout the kingdom. He reminded them to rule with kindness and fairness, to care for the poor, and to seek peace in all things. His words were calm but full of meaning, like the soft rain that nurtures the earth. Together, Esther and Mordecai showed that courage is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes courage is found in small acts of kindness. Sometimes it is the patient voice that speaks truth softly. Sometimes it is the faithful heart that trusts, even when the future is unclear. The people of Persia learned these lessons well. In homes and marketplaces, they shared stories of Esther's bravery and Mordecai's wisdom. They celebrated the festival of Purim with joy, remembering the great deliverance, but also the quiet strength that made it possible. On peaceful evenings, families would gather around lamps and firesides. Children listened with wide eyes, as elders told the story of the hidden queen who saved her people. The story was not just a tale of the past, but a living hope for the future. One evening, as the stars twinkled softly in the sky, Esther sat in her chambers writing letters. Her hand moved slowly and carefully across the parchment. She wrote to the leaders of Jewish communities throughout the kingdom, encouraging them to remain faithful and strong. She reminded them to be kind to their neighbors and to trust in the goodness that could overcome hardship. Mordecai, meanwhile, was in the palace courtyard, speaking gently with a group of young men who were learning to be leaders. He told them about the importance of listening, patience, and humility. He shared the story of the king's sleepless night, the discovery of Haman's plot, and the bravery of Esther. He spoke not to boast, but to teach. The night grew deeper, filled with soft sounds, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of a gentle breeze. The city of Susa rested, wrapped in the quiet peace that Esther and Mordecai had helped bring. As the days passed, Esther and Mordecai's influence continued to grow, not through power or force, but through love and faith. Their story became a guide for many a story that shows how one person's courage can change a nation, and how quiet faith can light the darkest night. And so, their legacy lived on, not only in the pages of history, but in the hearts of those who heard their story and found hope there. The story of Esther, full of bravery, faith, and quiet strength, is a light that continues to shine through the ages. Her courage to speak up in the face of great danger became a beacon for many, a reminder that even in moments of fear, hope can endure. As the years passed after the festival of Purim, the memory of Esther's actions lived on in the hearts of the people. Her story was shared from parents to children, from teachers to students, not just as history, but as a source of inspiration and comfort. Esther's life in the palace of Susa remained humble yet impactful. Though she was queen, She never sought glory for herself. Instead, she used her influence gently and wisely, always putting the needs of her people first. The palace gardens flourished under her care, filled with roses, lilies, and olive trees whose branches swayed softly in the gentle breeze. It was in these peaceful places that Esther often found moments of quiet reflection. Sitting beneath the shade of a fig tree or walking along the marble paths, she would think deeply about the journey she had taken. Her heart was filled with gratitude for the protection she had received and the strength she had found within herself. She knew that her story was not hers alone. It belonged to all who face challenges and choose to stand for what is right. Mordecai remained by her side, a steady presence and a wise counselor. His own life was a testament to faithfulness and patience. He continued to advise King Xerxes with humility, always mindful of the responsibility to care for the kingdom and its many people. Together, Esther and Mordecai worked to build a community rooted in kindness and justice. They encouraged others to live with open hearts and to seek peace in their daily lives. Their example was quiet but powerful, showing that true leadership comes from service and love. The festival of Purim became a cherished tradition, growing richer with each passing year. It was a time not only for celebration but also for remembering the lessons of courage and hope. Families gathered to share meals and gifts, to tell the story of Esther's bravery, and to renew their commitment to kindness. In every corner of the kingdom, from the grand city of Susa to the smallest village, people took comfort in the festival's message. It was a reminder that even when darkness seems near, light will always find a way to shine. The children who heard the story grew up knowing that they too could be brave. They learned that courage does not always roar. Sometimes it is the quiet voice that says, "I will try again tomorrow." They understood that faith can move mountains and that kindness can heal wounds. Esther's legacy became a soft but steady flame, passed down through generations. It was a story told around firesides, in schools and in homes. It was a story that carried peace and strength, inviting everyone to find their own courage and hope. And so, as the sun set gently over the city of Susa, and the stars appeared one by one in the night sky, the people rested in the comfort of a story that would never fade. A story of a hidden queen who found her voice, of a king who listened, of a people who were saved, and of a light that continues to glow softly in the hearts of all who believe. As the story of Esther reaches its gentle close, we find ourselves reflecting on the lasting legacy of a queen whose courage and faith brought light to a world once shadowed by fear. The palace of Susa, bathed in the warm glow of a setting sun, stands quiet and peaceful. Its marble halls and lush gardens hold the echoes of a remarkable story, one that has traveled through time to remind us all that even in the darkest moments, hope can be found. Esther's journey was not easy. From the moment she was chosen to become queen, she faced uncertainty and danger. Yet, it was her quiet strength, her willingness to trust, and her boldness to speak the truth that changed everything. Her story teaches us that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. It shows us that faith, even when hidden deep inside, can guide us through the most difficult trials. Mordecai's steady wisdom and unwavering faith were the pillars that supported Esther's journey. Together they shaped the future of their people, standing as symbols of hope and justice. The festival of Purim, established to remember their deliverance, lives on as a joyful celebration of life and courage. It is a time when families come together to share kindness, to tell stories, and to renew their faith in the power of love. As we look back on this tale, we see how small acts of bravery can ripple out to change entire nations. We see how kindness and faith can overcome even the greatest threats. The lessons of Esther and Mordecai remind us that each of us holds the power to make a difference, no matter how hidden or ordinary we may feel. In the quiet moments that follow, when the world grows still, we carry their story with us. It becomes a gentle light within, guiding us through our own challenges and fears. And so, as the stars twinkle softly above the city of Susa, we close this chapter with hearts full of peace and hope. The legacy of Esther's courage and Mordecai's wisdom lives on a timeless reminder that love, faith, and quiet strength will always endure. As we finish this beautiful story of Esther and Mordecai, I want to take a moment to thank you for listening so kindly. Wherever you are right now, I hope you feel calm, safe, and peaceful. May the courage and kindness of Esther inspire you always. May you find strength in quiet moments and joy in simple acts of love. If you enjoyed this story, please feel free to like, subscribe, and share so others can find this gentle tale too. I would love to hear where you are listening from your stories, and your kindness means so much. Now, as the night grows deep and the stars twinkle softly above, I wish you a very good night. May your sleep be restful, your dreams sweet, and your heart full of peace. Thank you again for sharing this time with me. Until next time, take care and be well.